Do you know how it feels to be publicly humiliated for 3 years by someone you're deeply in love with? To smile through dinner parties while he calls you my simple wife? To discover messages from his mistress on your anniversary? I do. The moment his wine hit my face, I felt nothing but calm. $10 million disappeared from his company account as Cabernet dripped onto my white blouse. I watched his smirk dissolve into panic as notifications pinged on every executive's phone around that mahogany table. What he didn't know, I became the majority shareholder the day after I discovered his second family. What his CEO didn't know, our hotel meetings were gathering evidence for the fraud investigation. What nobody suspected, each time he belittled me, locked me out, or threatened to leave me with nothing, I was building the case that would destroy him. 3 years of being invisible taught me one thing: revenge only matters when everyone is watching. Hello beautiful people. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you're watching from. If you're new here, I'd love for you to join our community. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever witnessed someone get exactly what they deserved. Now, let's dive back into this story. Eliza Barrett pressed her fingertips against the bathroom counter, studying her reflection in the mirror. Perfectly applied makeup. Not a hair out of place. The white blouse, James's preference for important meetings, spotless and crisp against her skin. 15 minutes, Eliza. James called from the bedroom, his voice carrying that edge of impatience she had come to recognize as a warning. Coming, she replied, voice steady and pleasant. She had become an expert at pleasant. At agreeable. At invisible when needed and ornamental when required. 15 years of marriage to one of Boston's most celebrated entrepreneurs had taught her exactly how small she needed to make herself to avoid his disapproval. James Barrett, founder and CEO of Barrett Pharmaceuticals, didn't tolerate imperfection, especially not from his wife. The world saw the power couple, the brilliant businessman and his elegant, supportive spouse. No one saw the calculated cruelty behind closed doors. What is taking so long? James appeared in the doorway, already frowning. At 45, he remained devastatingly handsome, dark hair barely touched with silver at the temples, piercing blue eyes, the lean physique of a man who considered physical fitness another arena for dominance. This is the biggest day of my career. $10 million, Eliza. Try to comprehend what that means. She smiled automatically. I understand, James. I'm ready. His eyes raked over her, looking for flaws to criticize. Finding none in her appearance, he pivoted. Remember, these are serious people. Don't try to be clever. Just smile and stay quiet unless someone directly asks you something. Of course. She had heard some version of this speech before every important event for years. The directives were always the same: be decorative, be quiet, be grateful. And don't mention anything about the contract details. You wouldn't understand them anyway. He straightened his Italian silk tie, blood red against his charcoal suit. I've been working toward this moment my entire career. Chen Biotech's acquisition of our patent portfolio will set us up for life. Eliza nodded, gathering her clutch. Malcolm Chen will be there. Obviously. It's his company. James checked his watch. He's flying in specifically for the signing. Apparently, he doesn't trust his subordinates with something this important. She followed him downstairs, her Louboutins clicking against marble. Their Beacon Hill home, 5,000 square feet of minimalist luxury, felt more like a showroom than a home. Everything perfectly placed, nothing out of order, nothing personal. Just like their marriage. As they slid into the back of the waiting town car, Eliza gazed out at the fall colors painting Boston Common. 3 years ago, on a crisp autumn day much like this one, she had stumbled across an email that changed everything. James had forgotten to log out of his account on their shared laptop. One message with an attachment: a lease agreement for an apartment in Providence. An apartment paid for by James, but occupied by a woman named Catherine Lane and her 7-year-old daughter. The child's birth date matched a period when James had been expanding into new markets with frequent overnight trips. The math wasn't difficult. that discovery had been just the beginning. Once Eliza started looking, the evidence of James's double life appeared everywhere: secret phone calls, unexplained absences, financial discrepancies that pointed to something much larger than an affair. "You're quiet," James remarked, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Just excited for you," she lied smoothly. He didn't look up. "Try to be a bit more animated at the signing. You look half dead when you're thinking too much." "I'll remember that." Eliza turned back to the window, feeling the familiar coldness settle in her chest. The sensation had become a comfort over time, a reminder of her purpose. If you've ever had to smile through someone's cruel words, you understand the strength it takes. Drop a heart in the comments if you know what it's like to be underestimated. And if you're enjoying this story of patience and payback, make sure you've subscribed for more stories of justice served. The car pulled up to Barrett Pharmaceuticals' gleaming headquarters. James exited without waiting for her, already focused on the assembled board members and executives waiting near the entrance. Eliza followed at the appropriate distance, the perfect corporate wife. As she approached the glass doors, she caught sight of a tall figure stepping out of a black Bentley. Malcolm Chen. 42 years old. Brilliant biotechnology innovator. CEO of Chen Biotech. And, for the past 18 months, her most dangerous ally. His eyes met hers across the plaza, just for a moment. No acknowledgement, no smile, nothing that would betray their connection. Just a fleeting glance that carried the weight of everything they had set in motion. Eliza took a deep breath and entered the building, feeling the weight of a flash drive in her clutch, a tiny device containing enough evidence to destroy everything James had built. Today, after years of planning, she would finally become visible again. The first time Eliza met Malcolm Chen had been calculated down to the minute. James had been particularly vicious that morning, criticizing everything from her breakfast preparation to her choice of reading material. "The Wall Street Journal? Don't pretend you understand any of it," he'd sneered, snatching the paper from her hands. By afternoon, she had accidentally encountered Malcolm at Café Vittoria in the North End, a place James never visited because he considered it too touristy. It had taken weeks of research to identify the cafe as part of Malcolm's routine when he visited Boston. "Mr. Chen," she'd approached his table with practiced casualness. "I'm Eliza Barrett." He'd looked up from his espresso, surprise evident in his expression. "Mrs. Barrett. What a coincidence. Is it?" She'd taken the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. "I think we both know better." That first meeting had lasted 3 hours. By the end, Malcolm understood exactly what kind of man James Barrett really was, and what kind of woman had been hiding behind Eliza's carefully constructed facade. The memories washed over her as she took her seat in the boardroom, positioned precisely where James wanted her, visible but not central, present but not participatory. Malcolm entered with his legal team, all precise movements and controlled power. At 6'2", with sharp features and penetrating dark eyes, he commanded attention without effort. Where James performed his authority through volume and intimidation, Malcolm wielded his through focused intensity. "James," Malcolm extended his hand. "Today is the culmination of months of negotiation. I'm pleased we could reach an agreement beneficial to both our companies." James's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The Barrett-Chen partnership will revolutionize cancer treatment. Your distribution network, my research, it's a perfect match." Eliza watched the performance with detached interest. James had no idea that Malcolm had seen the true research data, the clinical trials that had been manipulated, the side effects that had been hidden, the deaths that had been covered up. "Mrs. Barrett," Malcolm nodded in her direction. "Thank you for joining us today." "My wife wouldn't miss this," James answered before she could speak. "She knows how important this deal is to me." Eliza smiled politely, meeting Malcolm's gaze briefly. 18 months of clandestine meetings. Hundreds of documents smuggled out of James's home office. Recordings of his late-night phone calls discussing how to bypass FDA regulations. No one looking at them now would suspect their connection. The meeting proceeded with the usual corporate formalities. Presentations. Handshakes. legal discussions that James had always assumed she couldn't comprehend. Eliza sat quietly, the perfect corporate wife, while inside her mind, she rehearsed the sequence of events that would unfold within the hour. "Before we sign," Eliza spoke suddenly, her voice cutting through the room's polite murmuring, "I'd like to understand Section 5.3 of the contract." The room fell silent. James turned to her, his expression shifting from surprise to tightly controlled anger. "Darling," he said through clenched teeth, "this isn't really the time. It's a simple question." She reached for the contract on the table. The clause about regulatory compliance and liability. "I'm curious about how it addresses the Westfield clinical trial data." James's face drained of color. "Eliza, you're embarrassing yourself. You don't understand what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She met his gaze steadily. "I'm just concerned about potential exposure. After all, if the FDA were to discover discrepancies in the trial data." "Enough." James stood abruptly, grabbing his wine glass. His hand shook with barely contained fury. Time seemed to slow as he turned toward her, the crystal glass tilting in his hand. Eliza saw the calculation in his eyes, the public humiliation weighed against his need to silence her immediately. The wine arced through the air with deliberate precision, splashing across her white blouse and face. Gasps echoed around the room. "I apologize for my wife," James said coldly to the stunned boardroom. "She's been under psychiatric care. Clearly, she's forgotten her medication today." Eliza sat motionless, feeling the cold liquid seep through the expensive silk. Red wine dripped from her chin onto the document before her. 15 years of similar moments, private humiliations now made public, crystallized in this single act. Malcolm Chen stood, his face impassive. "I think we need a brief recess." As if on cue, phones around the table began chiming with notifications. James's financial officer blanched, staring at his screen in horror. "Mr. Barrett, the primary accounts, there." James grabbed the man's phone, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock. "What the hell is this? $10 million, transferred? That's impossible." At that exact moment, the boardroom doors opened. A woman in a crisp FBI jacket entered, flanked by agents. "James Barrett," she announced, "I'm Special Agent Daniela Way. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to distribute misbranded pharmaceuticals resulting in death." James turned to Eliza, comprehension finally dawning in his eyes. "What have you done?" Eliza stood slowly, dabbing the wine from her face with a napkin. "I'd like to introduce FBI Special Agent Daniela Way. She's been investigating Barrett Pharmaceuticals for the past 3 years." She smiled. "We've become quite close. I can almost feel your satisfaction through the screen right now. If you're loving this moment of justice, give this video a thumbs up. Have you ever planned something meticulously that paid off perfectly? Share your story in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you're new here. We have new revenge stories every week that will leave you speechless. 3 years earlier, 2 weeks after discovering Catherine Lane and her daughter, Eliza had made an appointment at Boston Private Bank. The account manager had been confused by her questions. "Mrs. Barrett, these offshore accounts are quite complex. Your husband typically handles these matters. I'm trying to understand our financial picture more clearly," she'd explained with practiced helplessness. "James is so busy. I hate to bother him with basic questions." The manager had walked her through the structures, shell companies, investment vehicles, accounts in the Caymans and Singapore. She'd recorded every word on her phone, hidden in her purse. That night, she'd created a secure email account and sent everything to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The response had come 3 days later, a request for a meeting with Special Agent Daniela Way. "Why are you doing this, Mrs. Barrett?" Agent Way had asked in that first meeting. Eliza had considered the question carefully. "Because he deserves it? Because I hate him?" She had shaken her head. "Those are true, but incomplete. I'm doing this because I can. Because no one thinks I can. Over the following months, Eliza had become the FBI's most valuable informant on James Barrett's criminal enterprises. Bank statements, research data, recorded conversations. Each piece a small revenge for years of psychological warfare. Then, 6 months into the investigation, she'd found something in James's personal safe that changed everything: a life insurance policy for her sister, Rachel, with James listed as the beneficiary. Rachel's car accident 5 years earlier had never made sense. Her cautious sister, driving off a bridge in the middle of the night. It had devastated Eliza, left her vulnerable to James's increasing control. The insurance policy raised questions that kept her awake at night. Questions that led her to dig deeper into James's past, and to discover connections between Rachel's accounting firm and an audit of Barrett Pharmaceuticals' research division. When she'd shown the evidence to Agent Wei, the investigation had expanded from financial crimes to potential homicide. "We need more," Wei had told her. "We need someone on the inside of his business operations. Someone he would never suspect." That someone had become Malcolm Chen, the brilliant CEO whose parents had lost their life savings in an early investment scheme run by James. A man with his own reasons to want justice. Now, watching FBI agents handcuff her husband in the boardroom, Eliza felt strangely empty. 3 years of planning, of playing the perfect wife while gathering evidence against the man who had systematically destroyed her confidence, her relationships, and possibly murdered her sister. "This is ridiculous," James snarled as agents recited his rights. "Whatever she's told you is a lie. She's mentally unstable, ask anyone." Board members and executives pressed themselves against the walls, stunned by the unfolding scene. Malcolm stepped forward, addressing the room. "As of 9:30 this morning, Chen Biotech has acquired controlling interest in Barrett Pharmaceuticals through subsidiary holdings." He turned to the board members. "Each of you will find documentation awaiting your review. I suggest cooperating fully with federal investigators." "You can't do this," James struggled against the handcuffs. "The deal wasn't signed." Actually, Malcolm's expression remained neutral. "The preliminary acquisition was completed last week through shell companies you unknowingly approved. Today was merely a formality." James lunged toward Eliza, only to be restrained by agents. "You stupid bitch. You think you've won? You're nothing without me. Nothing." Eliza met his gaze calmly. "I'm exactly who I've always been, James. You just never bothered to look closely enough." As the agents led James away, Malcolm approached her, offering a clean handkerchief. "Are you all right?" "Yes." She wiped at the wine stains. "Though I did like this blouse." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Small price to pay." "Indeed." Eliza watched the boardroom empty, executives scurrying away from the wreckage of James Barrett's empire. "We should talk to Agent Wei. There's still the matter of Rachel." Malcolm's expression darkened. "We'll get justice for her too. I promise." What no one in the room knew, what James himself never discovered, was that Malcolm Chen had been more than just a convenient ally in Eliza's revenge. He had been her sister Rachel's fiancé before her death. His identity changed after years abroad, building his own pharmaceutical empire specifically to position himself for this moment. Their shared loss had forged a bond that went beyond mere conspiracy. A bond they had both been careful to control until justice was served. As they walked from the boardroom, Eliza felt the weight of the past 3 years, the fear, the planning, the constant performance, begin to lift. But she knew the battle wasn't over. Justice for Rachel would require more evidence, more patience. The most unexpected twists are often hiding in plain sight. Are you surprised by Malcolm's connection to Rachel? Type plot twister in the comments if you didn't see this coming. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. The story is about to get even more intense. "The wine was a nice touch," Malcolm commented as they entered the elevator. "Did you know he would react that way? James is nothing if not predictable when his authority is challenged." Eliza watched the floor numbers descend. Especially by a woman he considers his property. Malcolm studied her face. "You never were what he thought, were you? No. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. I never was. The investigation into Barrett Pharmaceuticals uncovered layers of criminal activity spanning more than a decade. False research data. Bribery of officials. Illegal testing protocols that had resulted in 17 deaths across clinical trials, deaths that had been covered up through falsified records. Eliza provided testimony over months of grand jury proceedings, her MBA and background in biostatistics, credentials James had dismissed as hobby education, proving crucial to untangling the complex fraud. During that time, she maintained a careful distance from Malcolm. Their alliance remained professional, focused on dismantling James's criminal enterprise and building the case for Rachel's murder investigation. Whatever personal connection simmered beneath the surface would have to wait. 6 months after James's arrest, Eliza sat across from Agent Way in a federal building conference room, reviewing new evidence. We found it in a storage unit registered to one of his shell companies. Way slid a file across the table. Your sister was compiling this before she died. Eliza opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were financial records, highlighted sections of research protocols, and a handwritten note in Rachel's familiar script, patient deaths in Westfield trial deliberately misattributed. JB ordered data manipulation. Need to speak with FDA. This connects him directly to the cover-up, Way explained, and gives him clear motive for wanting Rachel silenced. Eliza closed the file, her chest tight. Can you prove he arranged the accident? We've located the mechanic who tampered with her brake lines. He's agreed to testify in exchange for leniency on other charges. Way's expression softened slightly. We'll get him for this, Eliza. I promise. Later that evening, Eliza stood on the balcony of her new apartment, a modestly elegant space in Cambridge, far from the cold perfection of the Beacon Hill mansion. The property seizures and frozen assets had stripped away the material trappings of her marriage, leaving her with a reasonable settlement negotiated as part of James's plea deal on the financial crimes. The murder case would go to trial separately. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Malcolm stood in the hallway, holding a file and a bottle of white wine. I thought you might prefer this to red, he said with the hint of a smile. Thoughtful. She stepped aside to let him enter. Is that what I think it is? Malcolm placed the file on her coffee table. The final acquisition paperwork. Barrett Pharmaceuticals is officially being restructured as the Rachel Winters Research Foundation. Eliza touched the file gently, emotion tightening her throat. She would have appreciated the irony. Using James's company to fund ethical research. It seemed fitting. Malcolm moved to the kitchen, finding glasses with the ease of someone growing familiar with his surroundings. The board approved your appointment as director of the foundation. If you want it. I do. She accepted the wine glass he offered. Thank you. They moved to the balcony, the Boston skyline glittering against the night sky. For several minutes, they stood in comfortable silence. I've been thinking about us, Malcolm finally said, his voice careful. About what happens when this is all over. Eliza studied his profile. You mean when James is convicted of Rachel's murder? Yes. He turned to face her. We've been focused on justice for so long. On revenge. I wonder if there's room for something else now. She considered his words. Their relationship had begun as a strategic alliance, complicated by their connection to Rachel. What had developed between them, the trust, the understanding, perhaps even the attraction, had always been secondary to their shared mission. I'm not sure who I am outside of this fight, she admitted. I've been playing roles for so long, the perfect wife, the secret informant, the grieving sister. Malcolm nodded. I understand. I've been defined by this mission too. But I'd like to discover who we might be together, without all that. I'd like that too, she said softly. But not yet. Not until he pays for what he did to Rachel. Then we wait. He touched her hand lightly. However long it takes. Their patience would be tested over the following months as James's legal team fought to suppress evidence and delay proceedings. High-priced lawyers argued technicalities, questioned chain of custody, and attempted to portray Eliza as a vindictive wife manufacturing claims. Through it all, she remained composed on the witness stand, methodically outlining the evidence she had gathered. MBA in Finance. Certificate in Biostatistics. Skills James had dismissed as her cute little attempts at education, now dismantling his defense piece by piece. 8 months after his arrest, as the prosecution closed in on the murder case, James made his final move. The call came at midnight. Agent Way's voice, tense and urgent. James escaped during transport. We believe he's in Boston. Eliza sat up in bed, instantly alert. How? Paid off a guard. We're tracking him, but I wanted to warn you. We're sending officers to your location. She hung up and immediately checked her security system, the one Malcolm had insisted on installing. All clear. For now. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. Cold determination replaced fear. James would come for her, his ego wouldn't allow any other outcome. She sent Malcolm a quick message with the security alert code they had established, then moved methodically through her apartment, retrieving the gun she'd been trained to use as part of the FBI's protection protocol. The apartment buzzer sounded 30 minutes later. The security monitor showed a delivery person holding a package. Delivery for Barrett, a voice called through the intercom. Eliza knew better. James was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. She positioned herself away from the door, gun ready, and called Agent Way. He's here. Officers are 2 minutes out, Way responded. Do not engage. The buzzer sounded again, more insistent. Then silence. The crash came from the balcony, glass shattering as a figure broke through the sliding door. James lunged into the apartment, wild-eyed and disheveled, a far cry from the controlled executive she had married. There you are, he snarled, brandishing a knife. The great mastermind. Did you enjoy watching me lose everything? Eliza aimed the gun steadily. Don't move, James. Police are on their way. He laughed, a hollow sound. Always one step ahead, aren't you? The perfect wife. So quiet, so obedient. Meanwhile, you were destroying me. You destroyed yourself, she replied calmly. I just made sure everyone saw it. He took a step toward her. You know what I did to Rachel when she threatened me? What makes you think you'll fare better? The difference is I know exactly what you're capable of. Her grip remained steady. Rachel trusted you when you offered to discuss her concerns. I never made that mistake. James's expression twisted with rage. You think you've won? Even if I go down, you'll never be free of me. I've made sure of that. What are you talking about? Insurance. His smile was chilling. Files that will be released if I don't check in every week. Everything, the FBI collaboration, your little revenge scheme with Chen, all of it. Your reputation will be destroyed just like mine. It was a bluff, it had to be. They had seized all his known storage locations, accounts, devices. Unless... The cabin, she realized aloud. You hid something at the lake house. His momentary surprise confirmed her guess. The Vermont property registered in his brother's name, the one place they hadn't searched because it had been sold years ago. Clever girl, he mocked. Too late now. He lunged forward suddenly. Eliza fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him into the wall. The knife clattered to the floor. James slumped down, clutching his bleeding shoulder and laughing through clenched teeth. You don't have the stomach to finish this. Sirens wailed outside as police finally arrived. Eliza kept the gun trained on her husband. I don't need to. You've already lost. As officers burst through the door, she lowered her weapon. James was still laughing as they handcuffed him, raving about hidden evidence and promises of revenge. Agent Wei entered last, surveying the scene. "Are you hurt?" "No." Eliza handed over the gun. "But we need to search the Vermont cabin immediately. He's hidden something there." That moment when you face your greatest fear and find strength you didn't know you had, isn't that powerful? If you've ever stood your ground against someone who tried to intimidate you, drop a message in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey of justice, please take a second to subscribe and join our storytelling community. Within hours, a FBI team discovered a waterproof container buried beneath the cabin's floorboards. Inside were files detailing Eliza's collaboration with the FBI, her meetings with Malcolm, and surveillance photos taken by a private investigator James had hired shortly after she began gathering evidence. It wouldn't have mattered, Wei assured her after cataloging the contents. This would only have confirmed his guilt. But I understand why he thought it was insurance. Eliza nodded, exhausted but relieved. He never understood that I stopped caring about my reputation the moment I discovered who he really was. With James back in custody and facing additional charges for his escape attempt, the final barrier to his prosecution was removed. The trial proceeded swiftly, the evidence overwhelming. On a crisp autumn day, almost 4 years after Eliza had discovered his secret family, James Barrett was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Rachel Winters. Guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the courtroom as Eliza sat perfectly still, her hand tightly gripping Malcolm's. Around them, reporters scribbled notes, sketch artists captured the moment, and Rachel's friends wept quietly. James didn't look at her as he was led away. His transformation was complete, from respected CEO to convicted murderer. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with his presence now shuffled in shackles, diminished and defeated. Justice isn't always swift, but it can be complete. If this verdict gave you satisfaction, hit that like button. Have you ever witnessed justice finally served after a long wait? Share your experience in the comments. Our community loves stories of patience rewarded. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as Eliza addressed the media. "Today isn't about revenge," she stated calmly. "It's about justice, for my sister Rachel, for the 17 patients who died in Barrett Pharmaceuticals' fraudulent trials, and for everyone who was deceived by James Barrett's crimes. The Rachel Winters Research Foundation will work to ensure ethical standards in pharmaceutical research and provide support for victims of corporate fraud." Questions flew from the assembled journalists. Had she known about his crimes during their marriage? Was it true she had worked with the FBI for years? What about her relationship with Malcolm Chen? She answered with measured precision, neither hiding her role nor glorifying it. This wasn't about her. It had never been. As the crowd dispersed, Malcolm touched her elbow gently. "Ready to go?" She nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained her through years of deception, months of legal proceedings, and weeks of testimony was finally ebbing away. They drove in comfortable silence to the harbor, where Malcolm had suggested they have dinner. Instead of a restaurant, however, he led her to a small private yacht. "I thought you might prefer privacy tonight," he explained, helping her aboard. The deck had been arranged with candles, wine, and a simple dinner. The Boston skyline glittered across the water as the yacht moved gently away from shore. "It's perfect," she said softly, accepting a glass of champagne. Malcolm studied her face in the candlelight. "How do you feel?" Eliza considered the question carefully. "Relieved. Empty. Satisfied." She shook her head. "All of those at once. And what comes next?" She looked out at the water, at the city lights reflecting like stars. "I've been so focused on bringing James to justice, on honoring Rachel's memory. I haven't thought much beyond that. Perhaps that's where I can help." Malcolm moved closer, taking her hand. "I've spent years defining myself by my commitment to justice for Rachel. For you. But I realized something during the trial." "What's that?" "That somewhere along the way, my feelings for you became separate from our mission." His voice grew softer. "I didn't plan for that." Eliza felt a warmth spreading through her chest, an unfamiliar sensation after years of calculated coldness. I didn't either. We started this as allies seeking justice, he continued. But I'd like to discover who we might be to each other without that purpose driving us. She studied his face, the intensity in his dark eyes, the vulnerability he rarely displayed. Malcolm had been Rachel's fiancé once, had loved her sister with the same determination he had brought to their quest for justice. That connection had initially made anything personal between them seem impossible. But time had transformed them both. Their shared mission had forged something new, a bond built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and eventually, something deeper. I'd like that too, she said finally. But I'm not sure I remember how to be in a relationship that isn't strategic. He smiled. Then we learn together. No timeline, no pressure. His fingers laced through hers. Just two people discovering who they are when they're not defined by the past. As they dined beneath the stars, Eliza felt the last pieces of her carefully constructed facade falling away. The perfect wife. The secret informant. The instrument of justice. Roles she had played so convincingly that sometimes she had forgotten the woman underneath. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with James or Rachel or the past 4 years, Malcolm requested. She thought for a moment. I used to paint. Watercolors, mainly. I was quite good. I'd like to see your work sometime. I haven't painted since before I married James. She took a sip of champagne. He said it was a waste of time. Will you start again? Yes, she decided in that moment. I will. They talked for hours, discovering pieces of each other they had kept carefully hidden during their years of conspiracy, his love of classic films, her interest in botanical gardens, shared passions for history and architecture that had never seemed relevant to their mission. Later, standing at the yacht's railing as they approached the harbor, Malcolm touched her face gently. May I? Eliza nodded, closing her eyes as his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they parted, she felt tears on her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered, brushing them away. Don't be. His thumb traced the path of a tear. They're part of healing. As they disembarked, walking hand in hand along the moonlit harbor, Eliza felt something she hadn't experienced in years, possibility. The future stretching before her, undefined and full of potential. James had been sentenced to life without parole. The Rachel Winters Research Foundation was already funding ethical pharmaceutical research. The victims of Barrett Pharmaceuticals fraud had received settlements from the company's seized assets. Justice had been served. Revenge had been exacted. And somewhere in the process, Eliza had reclaimed herself. Stay with me tonight, she said quietly as they reached her apartment building. Malcolm studied her face. Are you sure? Yes. She met his gaze steadily. Not as part of our plan, not as an alliance. Just us. He smiled, touching her face with gentle fingers. Just us sounds perfect. 1 year later. Eliza adjusted the framed photograph on her desk, Rachel smiling broadly on a hiking trip, her face alight with the joy that had defined her life rather than the tragedy of her death. She would be proud of you, Malcolm said from the doorway of her office at the Rachel Winters Research Foundation. Eliza smiled. Of us. The foundation approved the new patient advocacy program yesterday. 17 scholarships for medical ethics students, 1 for each of the victims. He crossed the room to examine the building plans spread across her desk. The research facility expansion is on schedule. Breaking ground next month. She leaned into him as his arm circled her waist. The grant committee is reviewing applications for the Clinical Transparency Initiative. Perfect timing with the congressional testimony next week. Eliza nodded, thinking of the pharmaceutical regulation hearings where she would speak about the importance of research transparency. Her story of corporate fraud, cover-ups, and eventually justice had made her an unexpected advocate for industry reform. The foundation she had built from the ashes of James's company now led the field in ethical research standards. the woman James had dismissed as simple now addressed medical conferences, advised regulatory committees, and oversaw millions in research grants. "Have you packed for Vermont?" Malcolm asked, changing the subject. "Almost." She smiled at the thought of their weekend retreat. The lakeside cabin, once James's secret meeting place, now transformed into their occasional escape from Boston, awaited them. "Good." He kissed her temple. "I have something important to discuss with you there." She raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious." "Patience." His smile held the warmth that still surprised her sometimes, the man who had once been driven solely by justice now allowing himself joy, even playfulness. Their relationship had developed slowly, deliberately, each of them careful not to rush what was growing between them. The shared trauma of their past created a unique understanding, but they had worked to ensure their connection was built on more than just their history. Later that evening, as they prepared dinner in her apartment, now their apartment, Eliza found herself studying Malcolm as he chopped vegetables with precise movements. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. "Just thinking about how far we've come." She handed him a glass of wine. "When I first approached you at that cafe, I never imagined we'd end up here." "No?" His smile was teasing. "I thought you planned everything meticulously." "Not this." She touched his face gently. "This was the one variable I couldn't predict." After dinner, they sat reviewing their calendar for the coming month, foundation meetings, the Vermont weekend, a fundraising gala for survivors of corporate fraud, Malcolm's business travel to Singapore. "I received another letter from James yesterday," Eliza mentioned casually. Malcolm's expression darkened. "What did it say?" "The usual. That I'll regret what I did, that he'll find a way to appeal, that I haven't heard the last from him." She shrugged. "Agent Wei has been notified. Are you all right?" She considered the question, remembering how James's early letters had disturbed her sleep, had made her jump at unexpected sounds. "Yes. They're just words now. He has no power over me anymore." It was true. The man who had once controlled every aspect of her life was now reduced to impotent threats on prison stationery. His appeals had been denied, his remaining assets seized, his reputation destroyed. Justice had been comprehensive. That weekend, as they drove to Vermont through brilliant fall foliage, Eliza felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The cabin, renovated and redesigned, held no ghosts for her now. They spent Saturday hiking nearby trails, enjoying the crisp autumn air and spectacular views. That evening, as sunset painted the lake in gold and crimson, Malcolm led her to the dock where two Adirondack chairs awaited them. "Wine," he offered, pouring a glass of her favorite Chardonnay. "Thank you." She settled into the chair, watching the light play across the water's surface. Malcolm seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his usual composure slightly fractured. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "I gathered." She smiled encouragingly. "Whatever it is, just say it." He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position leading an international research consortium. It would mean overseeing ethical pharmaceutical development across 6 countries." "Malcolm, that's wonderful." She reached for his hand. "It's perfect for you. It would mean dividing my time between Boston and Zurich." He watched her face carefully. "I'd be traveling frequently." Understanding dawned. "You're worried about us?" He nodded. "After everything we've been through, the distance, the separation, I wouldn't blame you for wanting stability." Eliza considered his words. "Do you remember what you said to me the night James was convicted? About learning who we are beyond our past." "Of course. This is part of that." She squeezed his hand. "We built our relationship while pursuing justice. Now we build it while pursuing our individual purposes too." Relief softened his expression. "So you're okay with a somewhat unconventional arrangement?" "Malcolm." She laughed softly. "Nothing about our relationship has ever been conventional. Why start now?" He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. In that case, I have one more question. Eliza's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring, not a diamond, which would have reminded them both of the engagement ring he had once given Rachel. This isn't because of our past, he said quietly. It's because of our present and the future I hope we'll build. Will you marry me, Eliza? Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eliza felt the final pieces of her old life falling away. The woman who had been systematically diminished, who had turned that invisibility into her greatest weapon, who had orchestrated an elaborate revenge against the man who destroyed her sister, that woman would always be part of her. But she was more now. Director of a foundation transforming pharmaceutical research. Advocate for corporate accountability. Partner to a man who saw her completely. I love you, she said, the words still new enough to feel significant each time she spoke them. And I love you. Malcolm drew her close. Not despite our history, but including it. Every part of who you are. Later that night, as moonlight spilled through the cabin windows, Eliza thought about the long journey that had led to this moment. The pain, the deception, the careful planning. The wine staining her blouse as James made his final, fatal mistake. The justice that had followed. It had never been just about revenge. It had been about reclaiming herself, piece by piece, from the man who had tried to erase her. What are you thinking? Malcolm asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Eliza smiled, turning to face the future she had fought so hard to create. That sometimes justice and happiness can be the same thing. And that concludes our story, everyone. From victim to victor, from invisible to invincible, Eliza's journey reminds us that true power comes from within. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Your support means everything to this channel. What was your favorite moment in Eliza's revenge plan? Was it the wine incident, the FBI reveal, or perhaps the final justice for her sister? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have suggestions for future stories you'd like to hear, drop those too. I read every comment. Thank you so much for spending this hour with me. Until next time, remember that the best revenge isn't just success, it's reclaiming your power and finding happiness on your own terms. The end.